Good evening and welcome back. Wherever you are right now, and I do mean wherever, whether you are tucked under a blanket in some northern city where the winter has gone on too long, or sitting on a porch with the screen door rattling, or lying on the floor of a room you are about to leave forever, I want to know about it. Drop something in the comments, send a message, write it on a piece of paper and leave it somewhere. It matters to me. Tonight, we are going somewhere very old. Tonight, we go to the first city, to the first queen, to the first woman who descended into death and came back out the other side. Her name was Inanna. She was many things before she was a name. She was the reed that grew before the land was firm. She was the sound a loom makes at night when no one is weaving. She was the planet Venus, which is both the morning star and the evening star, and which ancient peoples, and I find this detail extraordinary, though I am not certain why it matters so much to me. Yet here it is, did not always know was the same object. Two lights, one body. That tension is hers. It always was. Let me begin at the beginning, which is to say, before the beginning, which is to say, at the moment when there was nothing, and then suddenly there was something, and the universe was so startled by this that it split apart immediately, which may be the oldest story there is. In the first time, before the first time, there was only Namu. She is the most ancient of all the names, the primordial sea. Not water as we understand water, not blue, not cold, not moving, but something that preceded those categories, the undifferentiated substance from which all substances would eventually be pressed. She had no mother and no father, because there was nothing that could have produced her. She was not born. She was simply present. She was the ocean of before everything, and in the darkness of that before everything, she was also somehow awake, which is a thought that becomes more unsettling the longer you sit with it. From Namu came the first differentiation. An and Ki, sky and earth, they rose together, pressed against one another, a single thing and two things simultaneously, the way a sleeping body is both one person and somehow also two, the waking half and the dreaming half. An was the sky father, whose nature was height and distance, an authority that never had to justify itself. Ka was the earth mother, whose nature was nearness and darkness, and the terrible patience of soil. Between them, there was no separation yet. The universe in that moment was intimate in a way it would never again be. Every part of itself touching every other part, nothing abstract, nothing removed. The sky grew heavy with what it needed to become. The earth grew heavy with what it needed to become. And from their union came Enlil, the wind, the breath, the in-between. He was the first to understand distance. He was the one who pushed sky away from earth, who inserted space between the intimacy of before everything, who made the world possible by making it lonely. This is a detail most people skip over, and I think it is the most important detail in all of Sumerian cosmology. The world was made by a separation. The first act of creation was also the first loss. Every house you have ever stood in, every horizon you have ever looked at, every moment of air touching your face, all of that exists because something was pulled apart. After the separation, the gods began to fill the space. Nanna took the moon, Utu took the sun, and drove it across the sky in a chariot that was also a boat, which makes a different kind of sense than it seems like it should. Enki went down into the Abzu, the freshwater ocean beneath the earth, and there in the deep he kept the Mi, which were the holy laws, the ordering principles, not commandments, but rather the fundamental technologies of civilization, the blueprints for kingship and priesthood, and music and weaving and lying and truth-telling, and descent into the underworld and return from the underworld. The Mi were not abstract. They were objects. You could hold them. You could steal them. This matters later. The earth in those early days was covered with water and silence, and then Enki and Ninhursag made the land of Dilmun, which was pristine and clean, and where nothing had yet died, a place so new that even the raven had not yet learned to cry its dark note. Ninhursag was the mother of all living things, and there in Dilmun, she planted the 8 sacred trees of the world, and Enki ate them, all 8 of them, because his nature was curiosity and hunger and the inability to leave things alone. And Ninhursag was so furious at this transgression that she cursed him, and he sickened, and 8 parts of him began to die, one for each of the trees he had consumed without asking. He lay in the marsh, too proud to call for help. The gods sat in the dust and wept. And then, because the world was new and mercy was still possible in a way it would not always be, Ninhursag relented, came back, healed each of his 8 wounded places by giving birth to a new deity from each pain. The goddess, born from his healing rib, was Ninti, whose name means both Lady of the Rib and Lady of Life. And some scholars have noticed the echo of this in a much later garden and a much later rib. And I will not belabor the point, but I will not leave it out either. Enlil, who had made the world by pushing things apart, was not done reshaping it. He looked at the new land and decided it needed people, not because he loved people, but because the earth needed labor, and the canals needed digging, and the grain needed harvesting, and the gods were tired. He gathered the other great gods in assembly, and the assembly decided to make humanity from clay and divine blood. Some accounts say the blood of a slain god, a god who may have been sacrificed willingly or may have been chosen because he was inconvenient. The accounts differ, and this is one of those places in myth where the version you choose tells you something about the kind of universe you believe you live in. Were we made from a willing sacrifice, or were we made from a god that nobody wanted anymore? Both stories produce a human being. The human beings look the same, but they feel differently about what they owe. The first people dug the canals, they tended the sheep, they built the first cities along the rivers of the 2 lands, Tigris and Euphrates. And in those cities, they raised temples, ziggurats climbing toward heaven, mountains built by hand in a land that had no mountains, which should tell you something about what the people of this flat land were always straining toward. The cities rose: Eridu, Nippur, Uruk. They were small and loud and full of the smell of bread and animal dung and the particular sweetness of grain stored in the dark. They were the first attempt at permanence, and they were magnificent, and they were already in the process of accumulating the errors that would eventually undo them. Uruk was the greatest of them, or would be. It was the city of the sky god An, and his presence sanctified it, made it the axis around which the world's business turned. It was there that the temples were richest, the priesthood oldest, the rituals most elaborate, and it was there, eventually, that Inanna was born, or descended, or arrived. The language wavers on this point, as it does on most things that matter. She was the daughter of Nanna, the moon, and of Ningal, the reed goddess. This made her divine twice over, the grandchild of heaven and the child of light that borrows from the sun. Some traditions say she was the daughter of Enki. Some say she was the daughter of An himself. These contradictions are not mistakes. They are how myth acknowledges that a power this large cannot be reduced to a single origin. She came from everywhere. She came from the direction that held whatever you needed her to have come from. She was beautiful in the way lightning is beautiful, precisely because you do not want to be standing where she stands. She was the goddess of love. Yes, but understand what love meant to them. It was not the soft domestic warmth that word suggests to us now. It was also war. It was also the terrible need that makes a person do things they cannot explain afterward. It was the hunger that runs underneath civilization like water under stone, shaping everything from below, invisible, patient, inevitable. To be loved by Inanna was to be chosen for something enormous, and something enormous always has a cost. She was the morning star, radiant, briefly, at the edge of a darkness that will return. She was the evening star, the last light before the full dark, which is a different kind of radiance, colder, more final. The stories about her begin early, before the great descent, before the great war, before the great grief. There were smaller stories, though nothing about her is truly small, that show us who she was while the world was still new enough to be flexible. There is the story of the Huluppu tree, which I want to tell you even though it is not the main story, because it tells you something essential about what kind of creature she was. In the first days, a lone Huluppu tree was planted on the bank of the Euphrates, and the south wind pulled it up by the roots, and the river carried it away. Inanna saw it floating past and took it from the water with her own hands. She brought it to Uruk, and she planted it in her sacred garden and tended it with care, with the patience she did not always show, because she had a plan for it. She would make from it a throne and a bed, the symbols of authority and rest, the symbols of ruling and being held. But as the tree grew, it was colonized. A serpent who could not be charmed made its nest at the tree's roots. The Anzu bird, that great roaring thing, that storm bird, nested in its branches, and the dark-made Lilitu, wild and uncontrolled, made her house in its trunk. The tree grew, and its growth was also the growth of everything in it that Inanna could not control. She wept. She had planted the tree herself, and she could not reclaim it. She wept for the throne she did not have. She wept for the bed that was still wood and chaos. She went to her brother Gilgamesh, and he listened, and he armed himself with his great axe, 50 talents of bronze, and he came to the tree, and he struck the serpent at its roots, and the Anzu bird flew away with its young, and Lilitu tore down her house and fled into the wild. Gilgamesh gave Inanna her throne. He gave her her bed, and from the tree's wood she made for him the puku and the miku, drum and drumstick, the instruments of presence, the things that announce you have arrived. This is a story about the first dead between humans and the divine. He helped her, and she equipped him, and together they were present in the world in a way neither could have been alone. This is also a story about what it costs to have a garden. You plant the thing you want. Something else moves in. You have to decide how badly you want the thing you planted. In those same early days, before the great feats, before the descent, she went to Enki. She went to him in Eridu, to his temple over the Abzu, and Enki, who was cunning and warm and who delighted in her, as he delighted in all bright things. Though delight and wisdom do not always run together, he welcomed her with beer. This is an important detail. Beer was sacred. Beer was the civilization's blood. The feast they shared was a feast between equals or near equals. And in the warmth of it, Enki began to give her things. He gave her the high priesthood. He gave her godship. He gave her the descent to the underworld and the ascent from the underworld. He gave her truth, and he gave her descent into hell, and he gave her the art of lovemaking, and he gave her the destroying of cities, and he gave her the setting up of lamentations. He gave her rejoicing, and he gave her deceit. He gave her the giving of judgments. He gave her the making of decisions. One after another, drunk and generous, he gave her the me, the fundamental orders of civilization, 84 of them in some counts, the entire infrastructure of the human world. Then he woke in the morning, and they were gone. He had given them to her freely, in the feast, in the warmth, and she had taken them and loaded them onto the boat of heaven, and was already sailing back toward Uruk. He sent 7 waves of sea monsters to retrieve them. She deflected them all. She arrived in Uruk with the me, and the people came out to celebrate, and she unloaded them one by one onto the dock. The high priesthood, the godship, the eternal crown, the throne of kingship, the royal insignia, the shepherd's crook, the descent to the underworld, the ascent from the underworld, the standard, the quiver, the art of lovemaking, the kiss, the prostitute, the holy tavern, the holy shrine, music, the senior queen, the junior queen, the procedure of the En, the procedure of the Lagar, the senior throne, the floodstorm, the reed pipe, the resounding musical instrument, rejoicing, wailing, the art of metalworking, the scribal art, the smith's art, the leatherworking, the building art, the reed craft, the purification rites, the feeding of the god, the descent to the underworld, the ascent from the underworld, and 84 more things besides. She unloaded all of them. This is how civilization came to Uruk. Not from the sky, not from the wisdom of kings, from a theft, or a gift that went wrong, or a gift that went exactly right, from a boat ride and a young goddess who looked at what the world needed and took it. Now, we should talk about what it meant to be Queen of Heaven. She was given the title formally, though the title had been waiting for her long before the giving of it. She wore the crown that An had worn, because An, old, enormous, more principal than person by this point in the tradition, had chosen her, elevated her, made her the executor of his authority in the world of action. She held the lapis lazuli measuring rod and line. She wore the pectoral of gold. She wore the 7 divine powers around her shoulders, and she was terrible in this. Not terrible as in frightening, though she was that. Terrible as in the old sense, inspiring awe in the body before the mind has processed what it is seeing. She was the one the kings came to for legitimacy. The sacred marriage, and I will be plain about this, the sacred marriage was precisely what it sounds like. A ritual union between the goddess and the king, enacted each year at the New Year's festival. A rite of fertility and authorization, a way of saying, the earth's abundance is not an accident, it is a relationship. And this is the relationship, was her right, her authority, her gift, and her demand. The king who was chosen for this rite received something no army could give him. He received the sense that the universe had decided that his power was not merely political, but cosmic. The kings she loved were many, and they are worth a moment's attention even in this context, because they illuminate something about how she understood the transaction. Dumuzi, the shepherd, who would become her husband, and who would become her sacrifice, and who would spend half of every year in the land of the dead. Him she chose young, in the full flush of his beauty, the full flush of his power. She praised him in language that still startles. His hands were beautiful, his feet were beautiful, his eyes were grain-fed and bright. She composed hymns to the parts of him. She was not modest about this. She was the goddess of love, and she loved him without apology. And she also, when necessity required it, gave him to the underworld, which is a thing I will come back to, a thing that requires its own telling. But first, the great gathering of the gods and the first tremors of the order that would break. The gods had the world between them in a rough arrangement. An in the sky, Enlil over the breath and the wind and the authority of assembly, Enki in the waters below and in wisdom, Ninhursag in the fertile earth, Nanna in the moon, Utu in the sun and in justice, for the sun sees everything, and justice is what you call the sun's gaze when it falls on human deeds. Inanna between all of them, of love, of war, of the morning sky and the evening sky, of the city and the storm. Below everything, unreachable by most of the gods, was the great below, Kur, the underworld, the land of no return. The underworld was ruled by Ereshkigal, who was Inanna's sister, who was also a great goddess, who was not consulted in the arrangement of things above, because she lived below, because the great below was her inheritance and her prison simultaneously. And the gods above preferred not to think too carefully about what that meant for her. Ereshkigal, great below, she governed the dead, all the dead, the great and the small. And in the land she governed, there was no light, and no food, and no water, and no comfort. The dead wore feathers for their clothing. They ate clay. The darkness was complete. This was not cruelty, or not only cruelty. It was simply the nature of the place. Ereshkigal had not designed the underworld. She had been given it the way the youngest child is sometimes given what is left over after the others have chosen. She was not petty. She was not evil. She was the queen of a place that had never been meant to be kind, governing it with the severity that such a place required. And she was, in many ways, lonelier than anyone in all the world above her, which should matter more in this story than it usually does. The order held for ages. The great below stayed below. The great above stayed above. The cities grew, and the temples were tended, and the priests performed the rites, and the kings came to Inanna for their legitimacy, and the me kept the world in its proper arrangement. There were quarrels, there were wars. Enlil was banished once for violating Enlil, and followed her into exile, and they reconciled in a story that is uncomfortable to translate. and their union produced several more gods, including Nanna, which is how myths resolve certain kinds of violence by making it productive, which is a thing that should make us uneasy and usually does. There was the Great Flood, which Enlil sent because humanity had become too numerous and too loud, which is the most petulant reason for a genocide in the entire history of religion. And Enki warned one righteous man, and the righteous man built a boat, and the world was almost ended and was not. And after the water receded, the gods gathered and wept over what they had done, and Enlil was shamed, and the surviving human was elevated to immortality and placed at the mouth of rivers, which is a story about how quickly regret arrives after catastrophe and how little it changes what was done. But through all of this, the underworld stayed below. That was the rule. What goes down does not come back. The dead eat clay and wear feathers, and the living do not visit. Do not ask to visit. Understand without being told that this is not a door you open if you have any other option. Inanna opened it. She had no other option. Or rather, she had other options and chose this one, which is a different thing and much more interesting. Let me collect the thread here for a moment. I have been moving quickly, and I want to slow down, because what comes next is the most important part of this story, and I want you to feel the weight of it before it falls. She was everything. She held the me. She wore the divine powers. She was the morning and the evening and the city's beating heart and the army's bright edge. She was loved and she was terrible, and she was in every song and every ritual and every year's turning. She had, it would seem, everything. She descended into the underworld. Why? The text gives several reasons and none of them are fully satisfying, which is how you know you are close to the truth. One version says she went to attend the funeral rites of Gilgamesh, the bull of heaven, Ereshkigal's husband, who had been killed as divine consequences for divine actions, the way these things go. Another version suggests she went to extend her dominion, to claim the great below as she had claimed everything else, to be the queen not just of the living world, but of the world entire. Some say she went because she could not help herself, because her nature was to go toward the deepest thing, to descend where no one else would dare. Some say she went for Dumuzi, though this is usually the end of the story rather than the beginning. A collapse of sequence that happens with very old tales. All of these reasons are true. She was curious. She was ambitious. She was grieving in the way that powerful beings grieve, extravagantly, by doing something enormous. She prepared herself before she left. This is crucial, and most retellings rush past it. She gathered the 7 divine powers. She placed them on her body, on her head, the crown of the step, at her brow, the measuring rod and line of lapis lazuli, around her neck, small lapis lazuli beads, on her chest, the double strand of beads, on her body, the breastplate called "Come, Man, Come," around her wrist, a gold ring, in her hand, a lapis lazuli measuring rod, on her feet, leather shoes, 7 garments, 7 protections. She clothed herself in everything she was. She was not going down naked. She was not going down small. She was going down as herself, entirely herself, which was perhaps the most dangerous possible way to go, because the underworld does not accommodate itself to who you were above. It unmakes what you bring. She told her minister, Ninshubur, I am going. If I do not return in 3 days, go to the fathers of heaven and beg them for me. Go to Enlil. Go to Nanna. If they will not help, go to Enki. He will know what to do. He will not let me die in the great below." Ninshubur said, "Yes," and meant it. Inanna descended. She came to the first gate of the underworld, and the gatekeeper Neti, whose name means something like the one who is here, which is a name that suggests he has been at this gate so long he has become the gate, stopped her. He went inside to tell his queen that a visitor had arrived. Which visitor said she had come to attend the funeral rites of Gilgamesh? Which visitor refused to say why she was wearing the 7 divine powers? Which visitor was Inanna? Ereshkigal heard this, and she was still. The texts say her face went white, that she bit her lip, that she held the grief inside her. I find this moment harder to pass over every time I encounter it. Her husband is dead, and her sister has arrived, and the sister is wearing everything, crowned and ringed and breastplated and glittering, descending as a demonstration of power into the place that Ereshkigal has ruled alone, in the dark, without acknowledgement, without help. What she felt in that moment, the texts don't name it exactly. They don't have to. She told Neti, "Follow the laws of the underworld. Open each gate to her. But as she passes through, take from her one garment, one power, each gate." And so it went. At the first gate, they took the crown from her head. At the second gate, they took the measuring rod from her brow. At the third gate, they took the beads from her neck. At the fourth gate, they took the beads from her chest. At the fifth gate, they took the breastplate from her body. At the sixth gate, they took the gold ring from her wrist. At the seventh gate, they took the lapis lazuli measuring rod from her hand. Some accounts include the shoes. The shoes are always last. 7 gates, 7 powers. 7 times she asked, "What is this?" 7 times the answer came, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." She arrived in the throne room naked and bowed low. Ereshkigal fastened the eye of death upon her. The eye of death was a gaze, a look, a force. She spoke the word of wrath against her. She uttered the cry of guilt against her. The flesh of Inanna turned to a corpse, and the corpse was hung on a hook on the wall. This is a sentence that should be allowed to sit by itself. 3 days, 3 nights. Ninshubur waited. On the 3rd day, Ninshubur went to Enlil. Enlil said, "Your mistress desired what she desired. She should not have gone down to the underworld. There is nothing I will do." Ninshubur went to Nanna. Nanna said the same thing. They were old gods. They had the caution of old gods, the refusal to move toward anything uncertain, which is how you survive when you are old and the world has gone wrong before. Ninshubur went to Enki. Enki grieved. The texts say he grieved, he mourned. And then, because he was Enki, because his nature was not caution but ingenuity, because he could not hear the word impossible without immediately beginning to dismantle it, he made 2 creatures. He created them from the dirt beneath his fingernails. Small creatures, sexless, below the notice of the underworld's laws. Things that could slip through cracks that a crowned goddess could not. He gave to one the food of life. He gave to the other the water of life. He told them, "Go to the underworld." Ereshkigal will be groaning. She groans for herself. She groans because she has carried everything alone. Groan with her. Mirror her pain back to her. When she offers you a river of water, refuse it. When she offers you a field of grain, refuse it. Ask only for the corpse on the hook. She will give it to you. They went. They did exactly as Enki said. Ereshkigal was laboring. Some accounts say laboring in childbirth. Some say laboring under the weight of her grief, which are perhaps the same metaphor. And they groaned with her, and she was so startled by this, by the simple kindness of it, that she offered them gifts, and they asked for the corpse on the hook. She gave it. They sprinkled the food of life over the corpse 60 times. They sprinkled the water of life 60 times. Inanna arose. But the laws of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. No one ascends from the great below without sending a substitute. This too is a law. The Gala, the demons of the underworld, small and pitiless and without human understanding, attached themselves to Inanna as she ascended through the 7 gates, and at each gate her garments were returned, and she rose through them clothed again. And when she emerged into the upper world, she was herself again, entirely herself, all 7 powers restored, morning star and evening star and queen. And the Gala were with her, waiting for their substitute. Ninshubur was there, still loyal, still waiting. The Gala moved toward Ninshubur. Inanna cried out, "Not her. She wept for me. She kept vigil for me. Not her." They passed Shara, her musician, grief-torn at the city gate, dust on his head. "Not him," she said. "Not him." They came to Dumuzi. Dumuzi was seated on his great throne. He was not in grief. He was not in mourning. He was in his finery, elevated, comfortable. The seat that should have been occupied by a mourning husband gleaming with gold. The texts here are abrupt. They simply say, Inanna fastened on him the eye of death. She spoke the word of wrath against him. She uttered the cry of guilt against him. She said, "Take him." What she felt, the texts do not say. This is one of those places where the silence is louder than anything that could have been written. She had descended into hell and come back for him in some version of this, and he was sitting in his nice chair, and she looked at him and she gave him to the Gala. Is this justice? Is this grief becoming fury? Is this the simple, cold calculation of a goddess who has just learned that the laws of the underworld are perfect and they may not be questioned, and someone must go back? All of those things. She was all of those things at once. She always was. Dumuzi fled. He called on Utu, his brother-in-law, the sun, the one who sees everything and judges, and Utu turned him into a snake and he escaped, and the Gala hunted him, and he fled to his sister Geshtinanna, who hid him, and eventually they found him and took him, and the weeping began, the great weeping, the lament of Inanna for Dumuzi, the lament of Geshtinanna for her brother, the lament of the whole world for the shepherd who was gone into the dark. Anyway, Geshtinanna offered herself. This is what is almost always underemphasized in the tellings, because Dumuzi is beautiful and tragic, and the love story pulls the eye. But Geshtinanna, his sister, his scribe, the one who hid him and refused to betray his location to the Gala, even when they threatened her. She went to Inanna and she said, "Let me go in his place. Let me spend half the year in the underworld, so he may spend the other half in the light. And Inanna agreed. This is how the seasons were made, not from a father's rage and a daughter's kidnapping, though that too is a story someone will tell. Here the seasons were made from a sister's love and a queen's capacity for mercy, small and hard-won mercy, the kind that costs something to give. Dumuzi in the earth, half the year. Dumuzi in the sky, half the year. Geshtinanna taking his place, always, every year, faithful as the calendar. The world above grieved when Dumuzi was gone below. The plants withdrew. The cattle grew thin. The flocks gave no milk. The rivers dropped. And then, in the turning, he came back. And Inanna, even her, even with what had passed between them, opened her arms to him, and the earth filled again, and the grain grew, and the children were born, and the lambs leaped, and the old grief and the old joy were one motion. The way breathing is one motion, both directions at once. Let me tell you now about the heroes. Let me tell you the stories of the ones who walked at the edge of the divine, who received Inanna's attention, which was always both gift and burden, and who became through it something larger than they had been, and something smaller. The first, Enmerkar, son of Utu, king of Uruk, the one who built the city's walls up to the sky, the great shepherd whom Inanna loved. Before Gilgamesh, there was Enmerkar, and his story is about language, which is to say, it is about the most fundamental human technology, the thing that made cities possible before cities knew they needed it. He was born in the steppe. This is what some accounts say. Born outside the city, exposed, found, the origin of the destined king, always involved in a brush with the wilderness that should have killed him, but did not, because fate had spoken already, and fate's mouth is always slightly ahead of events. He was brought to Uruk. He grew up in Inanna's shadow, in the temple's light, and she chose him for the kingship, for the great right, for the role that makes a man the body through which a city lives. He was her beloved. He was her instrument. He looked south to Aratta, the other great city of lapis lazuli and gold, the city in the mountains that had things Uruk needed. And he wanted a trade agreement, and he sent his herald, but there was no writing yet, no way to carry a message complex enough for negotiation between rulers, and the herald could not hold all the words in his memory across so many mountain passes. And in Enmerkar, the accounts say he sat in silence for a long time, and this is one of those pauses that changes the world. Took clay and put the words into it, the first letter, the first text, the first time language was made permanent and portable. Was this Inanna's doing? She held the scribal art among the me. She had carried it back from Enki in the great boat of heaven. It was hers to give, and Enmerkar received it in the necessity of the moment and made it into a technology, and the scribal schools of Uruk would be the first schools and the first libraries and the first record of everything. Inanna was in it. She is in everything written, which includes this. The Lord of Aratta sent back the clay tablet with his own inscription, with his own message, and the argument continued for years, and it was never fully resolved, which is also the nature of writing. It does not end arguments, it extends them, it makes them more precise and therefore more durable, and perhaps that was always the point. Enmerkar built walls and dug canals and made Uruk the city that would be called the center of the world in every account that follows. He died and was buried with the honors, due a beloved of Inanna, and they wrote his name down, which they had just learned to do, and so he endures. The second, Lugalbanda. This is where I find myself staying longer than I planned. There is something about him I cannot move past quickly, and I am not entirely sure what it is, or whether I should be including this much, but here it is. He was one of the warriors sent by Enmerkar against Arata, when the diplomacy had run its course and the lapis lazuli had to be compelled rather than traded. He was not the commander. He was one among the warriors, a face in the line, and then he fell ill, and the army could not carry him further, and they left him in a mountain cave, left him with oil and water and cheese and beer, and said, "We will come back for you. The way people say, 'I will call you back. I will fix this later.' They meant it, and meant it less than they thought. He should have died. He was alone in a mountain cave with a fever and no help, and the divine attention was elsewhere, on the army ahead, on the cities, on the negotiations of power. He was nothing. And then the Anzu bird, that great roaring storm bird that had fled from the Huluppu tree all those years ago, that had been nesting in Inanna's tree and been driven out. The Anzu bird nested near the cave, and Lugalbanda did something extraordinary. He did not hunt it. He cared for its young. He brought them meat and water and shelter while the great bird was away. And when the Anzu bird returned, it found its chicks alive and well, and it asked the human what he wanted. He asked for the ability to run. He asked to be the fastest man in the world. A strange gift in a world of armies. A humble gift for a man who had been given access to a divine creature's gratitude. He ran. He ran past the army, ran to Enmerkar, brought back the news from the front in a single night sprint that should have taken weeks. He found Inanna's temple on the journey. She appeared to him, or her presence gathered in the air of the particular place, and she gave him additional gifts, courage and light, and the ability to read signs in the wild, to understand what the birds and the grass and the way of rain on stone were saying about the days ahead. He returned. He led the charge against Arata eventually, some accounts say, or he advised the charge, or he became the bridge between the two kings, carrying messages too complicated for any other messenger. The city fell, or was persuaded, or persisted, on different terms. The lapis lazuli came south. The tablets multiplied. He was buried as a hero. He was remembered. And in the great poem that would follow, the poem of Gilgamesh, he appears as a father, which makes him the father of the greatest hero of the ancient world, which means his story is also that story's beginning, its seed, the root from which the trunk grew up into the light. Anyway, I said I would only use this once, and I am using it here, in this pivot, to mark the place where the small stories are almost done, and the great one is about to begin. The third, Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, born of a divine mother and a mortal father, or the other way around in some accounts, or simply born enormous and unkillable or near unkillable. The king whose first impulse was to use his power incorrectly, who drove the people of Uruk so hard with his building projects and his energy and his appetites that they cried out to the gods. His birth was preceded by omens. His grandfather had him thrown from a tower to prevent a prophecy. The prophecy said the grandson would replace him, and grandfathers who are kings hear this kind of thing and behave badly, which is a pattern in prophecy stories. The pattern being attempts to prevent the prophecy cause the prophecy. The exact mechanism of prevention becomes the mechanism of fulfillment. He was thrown from the tower. An eagle caught him. He was raised by a gardener in the valley below. He grew, he returned, he ruled. He was magnificent and terrible in the way of early kings. Not evil, but without a counterweight, power without proportion. The walls of Uruk were his, the great temples were his, but the labor was the people's, and the labor was without end. And they cried out. The gods made Enkidu. They made him from clay and threw him into the wilderness, the mirror of Gilgamesh, the other half. Wild where Gilgamesh was civilized, natural where Gilgamesh was architectural, innocent where Gilgamesh was cunning. Enkidu lived with the animals. He protected them. He wrecked the traps of hunters. And one hunter complained to Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh sent a temple woman, a Shamhat, to civilize him, which she did through 7 days of intimacy and through teaching him bread and beer and clothing. And when Enkidu came to Uruk, the animals no longer knew him, and he wept for this. And the Shamhat said, "You have become like a god. Why do you weep for the animals?" And he wept for that too. He came to Uruk and fought Gilgamesh in the street. He had heard that Gilgamesh was taking what he wanted from the city, claiming the right of the king. And they fought until the building cracked, and then they stopped and looked at each other and understood that they were the same, and they were friends. They were brothers. They were the kind of companions that make every other relationship in the world look thin by comparison. Inanna watched all of this. Her city, her beloved city, or the city of the one who came before the one before her beloved. She watched Gilgamesh grow into himself, watched the friendship shape him, watched the Bull of Heaven episode approach, which was her doing, and I will not pretend otherwise. She offered herself to Gilgamesh. She approached him in his full beauty after the killing of Humbaba, the cedar forest guardian, the divine monster protecting what the gods had made remote, dead now by the hero's axes. And she said, "Be my bridegroom, give me your fruit." And she listed everything she could give him. She made an extraordinary offer. She was the queen of heaven. Gilgamesh refused. He refused badly. He listed her previous lovers and what had become of them. Dumuzi wailing season after season, the lalu bird with a broken wing, the lion killed in the pit, the horse beaten, the shepherd turned to wolf, the gardener turned to a frog. He made his point with the precision of someone who has a point to make and does not care about the cost of making it. This was not wrong exactly. The things he said were true, but truth delivered as a weapon is still a weapon, and she was still Inanna. She went to An and wept and demanded the bull of heaven, the divine animal that could kill hundreds with each snort, that could open the earth with its hooves, that was designed to end Gilgamesh for the insult. An gave it. It came down. It killed men in the hundreds. Enkidu grabbed it by the horns, and Gilgamesh drove his sword between the horns and the neck, and the bull of heaven was dead. Inanna wailed on the walls of Uruk. She tore her garments in grief, for Gilgamesh, her sister's husband, killed again, killed once more, the grievance resurfacing. Enkidu threw the bull's thigh at her feet. The gods held council. Someone had to die for killing the bull of heaven. Enkidu or Gilgamesh. They chose Enkidu because Gilgamesh was 2/3 divine, and the math of divinity works in its favor. Enkidu died slowly. He dreamed of the underworld first. A winged figure with the face of a lion and the claws of an eagle pressed him down and transformed him and led him to the dark, and he woke and cursed the Shamhat, who had civilized him, who had brought him to all of this. And then he retracted the curse because she had also brought him to Gilgamesh. And even at the end, even in the bitterness of dying, he could not wish that away. He died, and Gilgamesh fell apart. This is the beginning of the real Gilgamesh story, which is a story about death and not about heroism. He had been the great hero, and now the great hero was weeping over his friend's body and refusing to let them take it for burial, and sitting with it for 7 days until a worm fell from the nostril. And then he could no longer pretend, and he let them take it, and he walked out into the wilderness wearing animal skins, because what were the walls of the city to him now? What was the throne? What was the woman who had offered herself and who he had refused? None of it mattered. Enkidu was gone. And if Enkidu was gone, then the same could happen to him. And for the first time in his life, the king of Uruk was afraid. He went looking for immortality. He found Utnapishtim, the survivor of the flood, the one Enlil had elevated after the waters, living at the mouth of rivers in a place that was outside of time. Utnapishtim told him there was a plant at the bottom of the sea, a thorny plant that could give back youth. Gilgamesh tied stones to his feet and dove down and cut the plant and came back up and was beginning the journey home and stopped to bathe in a cool pool, and the snake smelled the plant's sweetness and ate it, and the snake shed its skin as snakes do, which is to say, the snake became immortal, and Gilgamesh sat down by the pool and wept. He went home. The walls of Uruk were there. He looked at the brickwork of Uruk, and the poem describes the brickwork in detail, its fired bricks, its foundations, its storerooms of clay tablets. And this is the ending. Not a triumph, not a resurrection, just a man looking at the thing that will outlast him, and understanding at last that outlasting is not the same as living forever, but it is what there is. Inanna is in this story everywhere and nowhere. She is the reason Enkidu died. She is the city that contains the walls. She is the love goddess whose rejection sent the hero toward his mortality. She is the me that includes the descent to the underworld and the ascent from it, which Gilgamesh sought but was not given. She is the morning star that Enkidu saw in his death dream. She is the evening star rising over the walls of Uruk as Gilgamesh reads the brickwork. She does not appear in the last pages. She does not need to. The fourth, Sargon of Akkad. This one is different in kind from the others. The others were heroes of the myths, heroes of the tablets. Sargon was a historical king, or something close to historical, the first ruler to build an empire that crossed the boundaries of the city-states, the first to claim all of Mesopotamia under a single authority, which he did under the explicit patronage of Inanna, under the explicit title Beloved of Ishtar, which is what the Akkadians called her when they absorbed her into their own tradition. Ishtar, same goddess, different syllables, same morning star. He was born of a humble mother. He said so himself in the text that bears his name. My mother was a high priestess. She set me in a basket of rushes. She sealed the lid with bitumen. She cast me into the river that rose not over me. The river bore me to Aki, the drawer of water, who lifted me out and reared me as his son, and I became his gardener. And in my gardening, Ishtar loved me, and I ruled the kingdom for 54 years. Moses, the baby in the bulrushes, the foundling king, the pattern that recurs because it is doing something necessary. It says that greatness cannot be manufactured by circumstance, that it arises despite circumstances, that the child thrown away becomes the king, which is either a beautiful myth of destiny or a comforting story we tell ourselves about a world that does throw children away. Both can be true. The pattern is the pattern. Inanna's love for Sargon was political as much as mythological. He carried her banners. He built her temples in every city he conquered. He appointed his daughter, Enheduanna, as high priestess at Ur, and Enheduanna wrote the great hymns to Inanna, hymns that are the oldest attributed literary works in human history, written by a named author, a woman, a princess priestess, a poet. And those hymns are still among the most extraordinary things ever written, in any tradition, by anyone, fierce and personal and full of Inanna's contradictions, the goddess who destroys and gathers, the queen of heaven, who is also the queen of the meat hook in the great below. Sargon built his empire, and it lasted a generation, and then it began to crack, as empires do. And the Gutians came down from the mountains, and the cities of the plain fell one by one. And eventually, Uruk was sacked, and the temple of Inanna was damaged or looted, or both. And Inanna wept over her city, or so the lament says. And the lament for Uruk is one of the oldest poems of urban grief in existence. The first city learning what cities will always learn, that they are not permanent, that the walls do not hold forever, that morning comes after the night, and after the morning comes another night. Let me tell you about the Great War that was not one war, but many wars, the continuous conflict that I have been circling since the beginning because it is too large to approach directly. The conflict between the gods was not a battle. It was an argument that kept changing its shape. Enlil versus Enki, order versus ingenuity. The god who could destroy the world versus the god who could always find a way around destruction. Inanna caught between them, aligned with neither, finally more powerful than both in the domain that mattered most, the human world, the city, the bed of the king, the cry of the woman in labor, the howl of the army at dawn, the specific wars, the wars between Uruk and Kish, between Uruk and Aratta, between the city-states of the plain, were her wars. She was invoked before every battle. She stood on the walls. The texts describe her putting on the armor of heaven, the divine arms, the flaming weapons that cut the sky, and going ahead of the army the way a storm goes ahead of itself in lightning. She was terrifying in this aspect. She was complete in this aspect. She was a thing that our modern category of love goddess cannot contain, because we have separated love from war in our understanding, and they understood that they were the same impulse, the same overwhelming force that comes from outside the self and takes you over, that makes you do things you cannot explain afterward, that makes you run into the spear line and into the beloved's arms with the same expression on your face. The great battle between the forces of order and chaos, There are several candidates: the conflict between Ninurta and the demon Asag, the conflict between Marduk and Tiamat in the Babylonian reworking, the battle that reshaped the cosmos. In each version, Inanna has a role, sometimes central, sometimes peripheral, always marking the place where the battle's meaning exceeds its violence. In the Ninurta cycle, she appears as the one who mediates, who brings the victory home, who transforms martial triumph into civic order. He has killed the stone demon, has built a dam from the body of his enemy, has made the rivers flow right. She is the one who receives this and makes it permanent, who turns the warrior's deed into the world's new condition. In the Babylonian tradition, Marduk defeats Tiamat and makes the world from her body, and Ishtar, Inanna carried forward, is given the stars for her domain, is given the planet Venus as her body in the sky, is assigned her role as the divine mediator between heaven and the human city. The Babylonian priests calculated her movements carefully. They tracked Venus across the sky, recording when she rose as morning star and when she set as evening star. And from these records, they made predictions. And the predictions were surprisingly accurate. And this is how mythology becomes astronomy, how the goddess's body becomes a mathematical object, how love and war and the harvest timing all collapse into the elegant grammar of planetary motion. This is worth sitting with. The same people who wrote The Descent of Inanna, who described her naked on the hook in the Underworld, also tracked the planet Venus with sophisticated mathematical models. The myth and the science were not opposed. They were the same attention, aimed at the same object, generating different but not incompatible kinds of knowledge. We lost this simultaneity somewhere and have been trying to recover it ever since. The War of the Gods ended, as all divine wars end, in a new arrangement rather than a true victory. Enlil remained the authority of the assembly. Enki remained the keeper of the me and the voice of wisdom, and the one who always found a way. Marduk in Babylon rose to the top of the pantheon and reframed the entire cosmology around his own centrality. Inanna Ishtar remained what she was, the queen of heaven, the morning and evening star, the one who had been to the underworld and come back, the one who had the me, the one who stood on the wall before every battle. The great below stayed below, but it had been visited. The door had been opened. Everyone knew now that the door could be opened, and what was on the other side of it, and what it cost to come back. In the aftermath of the great conflicts, in the long age after the wars that reshaped the cosmos, the world settled into something that felt like order, but was order in the way that a river's course feels fixed, stable until the flood, stable until the mountain shifts, stable in the span of a human life and not a moment longer. Uruk continued. The temples were rebuilt after each sacking. The high priestess role persisted. The sacred marriage was performed each year, the New Year's festival. The king coming to the house of the goddess to be renewed. The texts accumulated. The scribes in the Edupa, the tablet house, the school, copied and recopied the hymns of Enheduanna, the laments, the descent narrative, the story of the me, the story of the Huluppu tree, the story of Gilgamesh, and in copying they sometimes made errors and sometimes made improvements and sometimes understood for the first time what they were preserving. The lament tradition deserves more than a paragraph. though I have been speaking for a long time now, and I am aware that I have been speaking for a long time. The lament for Uruk, the lament for Sumer, the lament for Nippur. Each city that fell had its lament, its goddess weeping on the walls, the divine presence lingering after the human presence was gone. And each lament follows the same structure. The city was beautiful. The enemy came. The gods could not or would not stop it. The city fell. The goddess wept. Here is what was lost. This structure is the ur form of every elegy that has been written since. Every poem for a dead city. Every poem for a dead person. The same shape. It was, and now it is not. And the space where it was is still the shape of the thing. Inanna wept for Uruk, and Uruk was rebuilt. She wept for Sumer, and Sumer continued under different names. She wept for her beloved, and he returned in the spring. She descended into death and returned. The pattern of her life was the pattern of the year, loss and return, descent and ascent, the morning star setting, and the evening star rising and the morning star setting again. The grief was real. The return was real. Both were real simultaneously. This is the wisdom that is hardest to hold. Kur, the underworld. Let me speak of it directly, without ornament, because it deserves that. It was real to them, not a metaphor, not a symbol of psychological depths. Real, a real place below the real earth, where the real dead went. The dead were present there. They had needs. The living had obligations to them. Food offerings, water poured, the correct rituals performed, the names spoken aloud so it would not be forgotten. To forget the dead was to starve them. To remember them was to feed them. This is why the tablets were preserved so carefully, why the names were written down, why the descent of Inanna survived 5,000 years. Memory was life. The scribal act was a feeding, and death was not punishment. This is a thing I want to be clear about, the thing that separates this tradition from later traditions that use death as a threat. Everyone died, the shepherd and the king, the hero and the slave, the beloved and the reviled. Death was not a consequence of sin. It was the condition of having been alive. The grief was real, and the gods themselves could grieve. Inanna had descended and returned, and still Dumuzi descended each year, and she still, every year, let him go and grieved and received him back. Grief was not a problem to be solved. It was the correct response to loss. It was the thing that proved the thing had mattered. Ereshkigal. I want to come back to her, because the story is not complete without it. She ruled the underworld without relief. The texts do not describe her as evil. They describe her as enormous and alone, and in a kind of permanent agony, laboring always in the dark, receiving the dead who arrive stripped of everything, giving them their feathers and their clay, maintaining the rules that the universe had established. She was not given a choice about any of it. She was the younger sister. She was given the below. When Inanna descended, Ereshkigal killed her. This is usually described as tyranny or cruelty, or the jealousy of the dark goddess for the light. But look at what had happened from Ereshkigal's perspective. Her husband was dead. Her sister had arrived clothed in power and glory to the place where power and glory are stripped away. And if Inanna had been permitted to walk through the underworld fully clothed, fully crowned, the laws of the underworld would have meant nothing. No one would ever die, or no one would ever stay dead. or the whole structure of the cosmos would become negotiable, and it was Ereshkigal's job to maintain the structure of the cosmos below, as it was Enlil's job to maintain it above. She killed Inanna because the law said the laws applied to everyone, even the Queen of Heaven, especially the Queen of Heaven. When Inanna was rescued, when the gala came for their substitute, when the arrangement was made with Dumuzi and Inanna, Ereshkigal received a substitute for a substitute. She received the half year. She received the grief of the world above as payment. She received Inanna's sacrifice. It was not nothing, but it was also not, it was never the thing she actually wanted, which was to not be alone in the dark. This is the tragedy of the story that is usually kept just off the page. The later tradition would give her a consort. Nergal, the god of plague and the midday sun, came to the underworld, and they fought, and they fell in love, and he stayed, and she had a companion, and the underworld was different with him in it, slightly less cold, slightly less absolute. This may be a later addition. It may be the tradition's way of resolving what it could not otherwise resolve, a queen of the dead who grieves in ways that the living find too recognizable. What endures? The answer, and here is a thing I believe with more certainty than I believe most things, is not the gods. The gods are vessels. The gods are the shapes that human need carves into the air. What endures is the need to understand the morning star's return as something personal, as something aimed at you, as something that means the darkness last night was not the final word. The need to believe that what descends can ascend, that what is stripped can be reclothed, that the hook in the underworld is not the last location of everything you love. The need to have a name for the force that makes you do things you cannot explain, that pulls you toward the dangerous thing, that makes you look at someone across a room and understand that your life has just changed. These needs are older than Inanna. She is the shape they took in Uruk, in the alluvial plain, in the cities of the first writing. In Egypt, they took a different shape. In Greece, they took another. In later traditions, in the monotheisms that would gradually displace the old polytheisms, they took shapes that denied being shapes, that insisted they were not metaphors but facts. But the structure persists. The descent and ascent, the stripping away. The question, what do you do with your power when your power has been taken? The answer, you go down. You let the gates take what they take. You trust that the water of life is somewhere, held by someone who loves you, and that Enki, or something like Enki, some quality of the world that is not the same as the world's cruelty, will make something small enough to slip through the cracks and bring it to you. This is not theology. It is not supposed to be. It is the description of a pattern that the people of the first cities recognized in their lives and could not leave alone. They kept writing it down. They kept changing the names of the figures and keeping the structure. They knew they were doing this. The scribes who copied the descent tablets in the old Babylonian period were also reading the myths of other cities, the variations, the alternate versions. They knew Inanna was also Ishtar. They knew the pattern was the pattern regardless of the name. The planet Venus appeared each morning and each evening and did not explain itself. The human imagination, which cannot leave an unexplained regularity alone, constructed a story about why. The story was true in the ways that matter. It was true about grief, about loss, about the necessity of descending if you want to ascend, about the gala that attach themselves to every return. Whether it was literally true, whether there is a throne room below the earth where the naked dead stand in the dark, is a different question, and perhaps not the important one. Enheduanna wrote, "I am Inanna's servant. I who once sat triumphant now am banished." She wrote this because she had been banished politically by a usurper, and she wrote it in Inanna's voice and her own voice simultaneously. And this is the first time in the literary record that a human being uses the myth to process a personal catastrophe, which is the first time literature does what literature does best, which is to say, you see this pattern I am showing you? It is also your pattern. You are also on this road. You have also come to a gate and had something taken. I find this genuinely difficult to describe without sounding like I'm doing something the text does not support. But Enheduanna, standing in her exile and writing those hymns, finding in Inanna's anger and Inanna's power a vocabulary for her own anger, her own power, her own determination to be restored, it is too important to hurry past. The first named author in human history wrote in the voice of a goddess who had been to hell and come back, and she wrote it because she needed to believe in the coming back. She was restored. Inanna restored her. In the poem's logic, the goddess turned her face back toward Enheduanna, and the exiler was defeated, and she returned to the high priestesshood. Whether this happened in history as it happened in the poem, I cannot tell you, but the poem was preserved. The poem was copied for 2,000 years. The poem outlasted the usurper and the temple and the city and the civilization, and is here now, which is a form of restoration that is perhaps more permanent than the political kind. The tradition was absorbed. Ishtar in Babylon, Astarte in Canaan, Aphrodite in Greece. Though Aphrodite lost the war aspects, lost the descent narrative, became prettier and softer and less of a problem, which tells you something about what Greek culture needed a love goddess to be. Isis in Egypt, though Isis is her own tradition, and it would be wrong to collapse her into Inanna, though the resurrection narrative runs through both of them, like the same river, through different soils. Venus in Rome, the planet still called Venus, still the brightest object in the sky after the sun and moon, still appearing and disappearing and reappearing with that particular quality of seeming to announce itself. The Jungians will tell you she is an archetype, a structure of the collective unconscious, which may be true and is also a way of speaking about what the ancient scribes already knew, that she is a shape the mind keeps making, that every civilization discovers her independently because she is the pattern of something real, not in the sky, but in the human interior, the queen of heaven that is also the queen of the great below, the love that is also loss, the beauty that is also the eye of death. There is something almost unbearable about sitting with the full scope of it. No, let me try again. There is something that refuses easy resolution in the fact that the oldest named poet in human history was a woman writing about a goddess, that the oldest descent narrative is a woman's descent, that the first record of someone returning from the land of no return has a woman's name, and that for most of the centuries between then and now, these texts were buried in the ground, while other texts were elevated and taught and used as the foundations of civilizations. They were found again in the 19th century. They were translated slowly. The world rediscovered that it had a grandmother it had forgotten. The world remembered. Memory is what Inanna is, finally, when you strip everything else away. She is the insistence that the thing that mattered is remembered. She is the hymn that says the name. She is the tablet that survives the fall of the city. She is the planet that returns. She is the morning after the night. She is not the absence of the night. She is not the promise that the night will not be terrible. She is only the morning. She is only the return. She is the structure of the thing that persists, the pattern that the universe keeps making, the star that rises in the east before the sun and that is still in the sky, still visible if you know when to look, still called by her name. The descent is real. The return is possible. The gala will come for their substitute, and you will have to decide who you give them. The me are held by someone who may not have asked your permission before giving them away, and you will have to decide whether to sail through the night to claim them, or whether to let the sea monsters bring you back. These are not ancient questions. They are the questions of this morning. They are the questions of every morning. The star is there. It sets. It rises. It is both. Good night.